Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, January 10th, 2014. Let me tell you what my number one story is not. It's the, Christie, the New Jersey governor, and lane closure gate on the GW, the George Washington Bridge. Granted, it's one of the busiest bridges in the world. I think 300,000 cars a day go over the GW Bridge. But really, this is a top story. Some, a 2-3 rung down aide decides to have political payback, and this is what all the networks and all the news agencies are going to spend all their time and resources on. Let me tell you what my appraisal of this story is in a word: stupid. This is why the mainstream media is losing viewers, losing credibility, and losing its relevance. Look over here, look over here, look over here. Hey, here's a story for you. New York and New Jersey have, two of the highest deaths at the state level of any states in the union. Some of the highest. They're drowning in billions and billions of dollars in red ink. And this is your big story. You're going to dig into this? Really? I mean, if the mainstream media could only dig and spend these kind of resources into, the drone murder program, or NSA spying on all Americans, or how they're using the IRS as a political weapon, or how about the bloody civil war in Syria, or how Saudi Arabia is, saying that the Obama administration stabbed him in the back, or, there's a possible war between China and Japan over the Senkaku Islands. The list goes on. But the Christie thing, that's a big deal. They're going to leave no stone unturned and no email unread. They're really, really going to go after this. Yes. Look over here, look over here, look over here. Speaking of which, here's another, I've said this from the time I've been on with USA Watchdog, that there is no real recovery. And I've had sources and interview subjects. Former Assistant Treasury Secretary Paul Craig Roberts, no recovery. John Williams, shadowstats.com, just this past week, no recovery. But yet, hey, here's the job situation. The job growth's looking better and better. Look at that. It's looking good, folks. It's looking better and better. Who cares if the labor participation rate is bouncing around 30-year lows? That's people who aren't looking or aren't counted for jobs, underemployed, unemployed. The real unemployment rate wouldn't be around 7% if you did it the way it was in 1994 and earlier. According to John Williams at Shadow Stats, it'd be, north of 22, 23%, somewhere in that neighborhood. The real unemployment, underemployed, unemployed rate. That would be the real rate. And who cares if those jobs are part-time and low-wage paying jobs? Jobs are getting better and better. It's just getting better and better. The recovery. It's a recovery. It's out there. Of course, here's another story that probably should have been included in this story. I like this story. This is kind of sad, too, because if you look right here, Macy's, right here, Macy's is laying off 2,500 people. Here we go. Let me get it in focus here for you. There you go. 2,500 jobs. For profitability, that's why they're spending it, for profitability. So let me get this straight. You're selling one of the nation's largest retailers is selling so many products, so many things that they have to lay off 2,500 people and close 5 stores. That's growth. That's a good economy. Granted, I know some of it went to online sales, but still, that's being spun as profitable. They're selling so much stuff that they had to lay people off and close stores? Really? Janet Yellen is the new Federal Reserve chief, and in her first Time magazine interview, Janet Yellen, I'm going to read you her quote. She said, a lot of people say this asset buying, this is the $75 billion a month the Fed is buying. Starting this month, it was $75 billion a month the Fed is buying to prop up the banks and the economy. $35 billion a month just to the big banks. Of course, nobody will ever ask which banks are getting this money. But anyway, a lot of people say this asset buying is just helping rich people, but it's not true. Our policy is aimed at holding down long-term interest rates, I'm reading her quote, which supports the recovery. It's back to that recovery. It supports the recovery by encouraging spending. Well, I guess Ms. Yellen didn't see that Time, Ms. Yellen and Time, didn't see that op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal back in November by former Fed official Andrew Hazar. He was in charge, at least in part, of the bond buying program, and he made a public apology. He did an op-ed piece and then also went on CNBC and made a public apology by saying, and I quote, I'll read his quote, "The central bank continues to spend QE as a tool for helping Main Street. But I've come to recognize the program for what it really is, the greatest backdoor Wall Street bailout of all time." Yeah, right, the Fed is helping the little guy. That's rich. Time magazine, you should be ashamed of yourself for not bringing this up in her story. That was a puffball piece. You're not a news organization. Wake up. You're a spin doctoring device, and a government one at that. Another, or one that works, helps push the government, recovery. QE is helping little people, idea here. It's another week and another pretty big fine for JPMorgan. Here it is. I mean, it's again, JPMorgan's Madoff penalty tops $2.5 billion. Now, part of this is restitution, but part of it is to settle criminal charges. Criminal charges. This is a $65 billion fraud. You've heard about it by Bernie Madoff and crew, his business. $65 billion. People took a pounding. They lost. Some of them lost everything. And JPMorgan gets to get their checkbook out and write a check and settle criminal charges. Boy, I bet you Bernie Madoff would have liked to have gotten his checkbook out and written a check to settle criminal charges instead of spending the rest of his life in jail. Now, let's add up some of these penalties and losses and restitution. $2.5 billion in restitution and losses. And remember that London whale trade where they lost $6.2 billion and paid another all total of more than $1 billion and about $7.2 billion. Oh, and then the mortgage security mortgage bond deal, which they still face pending criminal charges. The civil penalty was $13 billion, 2.5, 7.2, 13 billion. Isn't that almost 23 billion? 22.7, 23 billion, almost 23 billion dollars in the last year alone in losses, restitution, penalties. And there's still an ongoing criminal investigation, and that $13 billion that JPMorgan paid did not release them from possible criminal charges. Okay, two questions. Why don't any bankers get charged or criminally or go to jail? That's number one. Number two, how does Jamie Dimon still have a job? How does he still have a job? Hey, well, here's where the USA Today put the story. Here's the money section, USA Today. And they made sure they put it on the back page, above this little advertising, on the back page of, it's a $2.5 billion Madoff. It's like 2.6, they're saying, nearly. They put it on the back page of USA Today. Of course, I'm sure that the ongoing business relationship that JPMorgan has with Gannett, who owns USA Today, and also their shareholder in USA Today, I guess that wouldn't really affect anything. Here's this guy, Michael Wolff. Okay, he's Billy Badass. Hey, Michael, here's a story idea. How can a CEO his company still facing possible criminal charges, and he sits atop of a company that lost nearly $23 billion in fines, restitution, and trading losses. How does Jamie Dimon still have a job? That's a good one for you, isn't it? That's a good one. It's a good story. You think USA Today is going to cover that story? You think Michael Wolff's going to cover that story? I hope you do, Michael. I think you're a good guy, but I don't think your company will allow you to do that. And finally, just two more side notes. The UK Royal Mint ran out of its 2014 sovereign gold coins. They're called sovereigns, but they ran out of their 2014 sovereigns gold coins. What is this, a week into 2014? They're outdone. The UK Mint was quoted by saying, the reason why we're out is because of exceptional demand. You think? You print tons of money and your economy's in the tank and you're looking at printing tons more money and people are rushing to go buy gold. Here's another side note across the pond. This was a record year for gun buying in the United States of America. More than 21 million background checks were performed. You can buy more than one gun with these background checks. More than 21 million background checks were performed, and a record number of guns were sold in the United States of America in 2013. Maybe people on both sides of the ocean aren't that stupid, and maybe they're starting to wake up. I certainly hope so. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you so much for commenting on the site. Thank you for using the donations button. You all go out and have a nice weekend.